Well, hello, everyone. Delighted to be here with you. All right, shall we go ahead and get started? Brilliant. All right, well, beautiful souls, I really, truly am happy to be here with you today. Today is all about talking about gripping when we start to receive and how that can impact what it is that we actually get to experience in our day to day life. And I'd love to start with a story. So this happened to me. Oh, it's been about 3 years ago now. So about 3 years ago, I received an unexpected $50,000 gift, and initially, it was exciting. As I said, it was unexpected. It dropped in. It was fun to think about. It was just amazing, right? And I initially had some ideas about what I wanted to do with that money. My husband and I are people who drive our cars until they absolutely say they're done. We had about 300,000 miles on our Honda Odyssey, and all the kids were out of the house. So it was time for something different. And our van was certainly telling us that it was about time for her to be done. I had two kids that were getting married the next year, and there were some household renovations that I wanted to do. So there were all of these things that popped up in my mind as to how I was going to utilize, how I was going to flow with this amazing gift. And then I don't remember, it wasn't very long after that where all of a sudden I went from, wow, this is really amazing, into absolutely gripping. I had tension in my belly. My head was spinning. I even had some tightness in my chest. When I thought about working with this money, I I spent so much time agonizing. What was the very best way to utilize this money? Because of how it came to me, I really didn't see any way that particular way was going to happen again. And so all of a sudden I had this fear get ignited in my body about I need to do this correctly. I need to do right by this money. I need to make sure that I like every dollar of this money is spent accurately. Whatever that means, even, right? Accurately, what does that even mean? And I tell you what, not only did I have that fear, but I also started feeling guilty. I felt really, I felt maybe even a little bit of shame about how much anxiety was rising up in my body. I freaking teach about receiving. I help people all over the world learn about how to receive what they want. And here was this thing that I wanted, and I was having such a physical response, such a grip, right? And so I had the grip, and then I had the fear and the worry and the guilt, and it just created more stress. And then I was berating myself as one does or doesn't do when you're conscious and connected, but that's where I was, right? So this is where I want to start our conversation today. Most most creation conversations are about manifesting what you want, right? You put up the vision board, you get really clear, all of the different things. And of course that first step is key, right? I couldn't spend $50,000 without it first coming in, right? I couldn't utilize that money until it came in. But what comes after that manifestation coming to you? How do you react when that manifestation comes in? How you react is going to impact how other manifestations come in or how long that particular manifestation stays in your experience. Because the reality is, I had that amazing flow, and then it just stopped. My flow from my business stopped. My flow from other sources stopped. And I had really spent those 3 months before I received that gift. I was really cultivating my ability to receive. I was cultivating all of the different pieces within me that would allow me to receive something. And I did. I would never have believed that it would have come in the way that it did, but I had spent all that time self cultivating, and then I flipped received that amazing money, and I utilized it in some really beautiful ways, but the flow stopped. And so it really helped me understand that how we respond to that manifestation, whether we end up gripping or whether we end up allowing the flow, really makes a difference. So that was an amazing experience in that it allowed me to step into this brand new series that I'm offering. Welcome to the Abundance That Stays series. Within this series, we are talking about the 5 pillars to creating abundance that stays. And it isn't that, it's a little bit like a river, right? I can't remember who said it, but right, that saying, you can't put your feet in the same river twice, right? If you are stepping off of the river's edge, it's a different river every time you step in, but there's always water flowing. That's the kind of abundance that stays that I'm talking about. You allow yourself to expand the amount of goodness that you can receive and continue to experience, not just this, oh, manifestation, everything drops off, time passes. Manifestation, everything drops, time passes, right? For those of you who don't know me, I am Jennifer Bloom, Soul Abundance Guide, and I help spiritually inclined people make the mental, emotional, spiritual shifts to create their own inner receiving architecture so they can finally have what they want. Right? And as I said, I'm delighted to be here. This is episode 2. In the first episode, we talked about expanding your capacity. So the best way to explain that is, let's say that you want to be an Olympic swimmer and you want a practice pool in your backyard, but you only dig about a cubic yard of space, right? If you go to fill the pool with the pool-sized water, right? An Olympic swimming pool is going to hold a lot of gallons of water, but if you've only got this cubic meter or cubic yard and you pour the Olympic-sized swimming pool water in, what's going to happen? You're going to fill that cubic yard, but you're going to lose a lot of that water to the ground, right? It's just going to splash everywhere. In the same way, you are limited to the amount of abundance that you experience by the capacity that you can hold. Right? Today's episode, we're talking about that moment or series of moments that happen just as manifestation is coming into your experience. We're talking about that point in time where you end up gripping, holding on, instead of flowing and allowing that amazing manifestation. So what do I mean by grip? Grip starts as a mental or an emotional or a physical tightening in your body in response to receiving something that you've asked for. So maybe you get a clench in your belly or in your heart center. Maybe you start having kind of that cascade, that tumbling of thoughts, or maybe even just a sense that, ooh, something's not right. This is amazing, but something's off. Something's not right. Maybe it slides into a fear, right? that sense of, when's that other shoe going to drop? At its core, gripping is an attempt to hold on to secure what feels uncertain. Now, gripping ends up morphing into over planning or overworking, being in a space where you are working really hard to control outcomes. Or it can also go the opposite direction. You can end up emotionally detaching. You can, right? So, thinking back to my example of receiving that financial gift, initially it's this really great experience, and then it's too much, and then shutting down, not being able to connect and feel what it is that I want, right? So gripping, it starts out as something physical. If you, as you become more aware, we'll walk through an exercise here in a moment, but it starts out as this physical tension. And then depending on what your patterns are, what the way you tend to handle tension, it morphs into some sort of action that is going to help you try to control what it is that you're receiving. But what it does is it shuts everything down. It shuts down that energetic flow. It shuts down that communication between you and the universe. um if you think about, and listen, abundance isn't just money. If you think about being in a relationship and having an abundance of love, and if you were somebody who is connected with a new person, and that new person is reaching out to you, that new person is inviting you to go places, that new person is inviting you into a deeper connection, and something is off, right? And you're feeling it in your body, and you're afraid, and if I'm vulnerable, how do I open up? And you shut down, and you stop answering the texts, or you stop answering the phone calls, or when you're present with somebody, you're not really there, you're not listening. What's going to happen? That other person is going to walk away. And the divine, universe, God, nature, universe, whatever your language is for that which is bigger than us, never walks away. But our connection shuts down and the flow shuts down. When you go into that space of over controlling by trying to, so for example, in the story that I told, right, trying to come up with exactly the right way to spend my money. Is it, should I, should it all get spent on one thing? Should it get spent on multiple things? When I got into that space of trying, right, it didn't feel comfortable, right? I wasn't used to having that flow come in. And so because I wasn't used to having that flow come in, that part of me that gripped then went into my pattern of, well, I'll just make a plan. I'll figure out this puzzle. I'm really good at figuring out puzzles. All right. So remember, grip is what happens, and grip is what we do when we don't trust goodness to remain. Let me say that again. Grip is what we do. Grip is what happens when we don't trust goodness to remain. Okay. Tying this into the first pillar, which was all about capacity before creation, your capacity determines how much you can hold. Grip determines whether you let that holding tank fill up. Okay? So it's important to pay attention to what it is that you do, what your response is when a manifestation comes in. So why do we do it? We all intellectually know differently, right? If you're here in my community, this is not your first rodeo in terms of creating a relationship with abundance. It's not your first rodeo in working with manifestation or divinity or knowing your own divinity. You've had a lot of experience, right? So intellectually, we know better, in quotes, but the patterns that we hold within our mind, body, soul systems can create that gripping. Maybe you learned it from the adults in your life as you were growing up. Maybe you were getting messages like, don't get too big for your britches. Who do you think you are, thinking that you can have all of this? We can't afford that. Um, it's better to give than receive. All of those patterns, all of those messages that we soak up when we're young, before we even realize what we're doing, that can form a foundation within our subconscious, within all of those rules that we work with, and so it sets up this expectation that things could go wrong. So that's one way that grip can start. And actually, you can end up having that reinforced accidentally by having personal experiences of getting really good news and then having a loss. Right? You send your car in for its annual inspection. Everything is great, and then 2 weeks later, the engine drops out. That's extreme, but right. Or you do you launch a new program and you get one or two people, or you have a really great launch and you turn it into an evergreen product and then nobody buys the evergreen product. Okay, so you've received something and then it all goes away. Right? So that's another way that gripping can start, because we have that experience. And I talk about this as heartbreak abundance, abundance heartbreak, right? Where we know that something is supposed to be different, but we're not receiving it. All right. So another way that gripping happens is when you start creating beyond your identity. And here's what I mean by that. Well, the best way to do this is through an example. So I'm going to ask you to think about money and think about how money flows to you. And if I give you the sentence starter, I'm the kind of person who experiences blank with money, how would you fill that in? I'm the kind of person who experiences ease with money. I'm the kind of person who experiences hardship with money. I'm the kind of person who easily receives unexpected gifts and expects more. Right? Clearly, that's not where I was when I received this amazing gift. I mean, I had done enough work to create it, but then I didn't necessarily have the experience to say, yeah, this is who I am. This is just what happens. We end up holding our identity. I see this a lot when I work with clients who used to work in corporate and they're used to getting a paycheck and then they start running their own business. Right? Because their receiving identity is very much wrapped up in, I do X amount of work, I work X amount of hours, and then that entity over there gives me money. But then when you move into a completely different model where it's not as cut and dry, things get a little bit screwy. You take away the foundation of what you know, and then all of a sudden, right? So we're going to spend a lot of time actually next episode talking about your receiving identity. But that's a place to get that. That's enough information to get started, right? One other way that you can think about how gripping starts or why gripping comes in is if what you receive is going to make you more visible than what you can hold. Let's say that you have written a book and you get a contract to go do speaking engagements, and perhaps this is something that's been on your list. It's been what you know, it's what you were hoping for when you wrote that book, and yet the idea of being in front of a room of hundreds of people and you're sharing your experience, you're sharing your teaching, all of a sudden that sense of oh, all those eyes on me, all those people thinking about and sharing their opinions about what I have said, right? So if you are receiving something that challenges your comfort level in terms of how visible you're going to be or how vulnerable you're going to be, right? How I've worked with a lot of business owners who don't want to do video. They don't want to do YouTube. They don't want to be seen. But there's that ache, right? There's that desire to get themselves out into the world. But when it comes to the vulnerability they're feeling, they haven't yet been able to expand that enough in order to be able to receive. So if something starts to come in, viewers start coming in, then there's that gripping can hold on, and then you end up right, so that you grip and then there's some sort of action. Maybe you're somebody who hasn't wanted to be seen, and so you get that video out there and you get people starting to comment, and then whoop, the grip comes in. Maybe your action then is to self-sabotage. All right, well, I'm not going to do that again. Okay. So that the gripping, no matter how it starts, always, that's a pretty strong, right? You're not supposed to say always or never, but that gripping impacts strongly your ability to continue to hold a larger and larger amount of abundance, right? And ultimately, I do think that that's what we want. It isn't just these singular manifestations. When I talk to people, when I do soul money identifications and I ask people, what is it that you want about money? Usually, what I hear in one form or another is, I don't want to have to worry about this anymore. I don't want to have to think about money anymore. I want to have enough money that I don't have to think about it. In other words, I don't want to have to worry about it. I don't want to have fear. I don't want to have all of these negative things that I have associated with money, right? So ultimately, it isn't just that we want a six-figure business or a seven-figure business or a certain amount of money in the bank. What we really, really want is that ability to have the capacity to continue to flow goodness into us and consistently expand how much we're being able to hold. Right? Okay. So let's look a little bit at what your gripping looks like. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to think about a recent win, a recent manifestation, something good that happened, and maybe it's money and maybe it's another form of abundance. Go ahead and think about that. And then once you have that, what happened in your body when that good thing came along? Did you go, right? Did you exhale and say, whew, finally it's here? Or was that moment of exhaling and glad it's here followed by, what do I need to do to keep this? How long is this going to stick around? Did your mind want to step into something? Okay. As you notice that moment of gripping, tune into your body. Do you have any tightness anywhere? If anything in the muscles of your body, maybe your jaw or maybe your hands? Do you have tension in your stomach? Is your mind starting to bubble? And then once you have that feeling state, what would happen if that sensation just softened? Maybe just 5%, 10%. Imagine slowing down your breathing. Imagine your shoulders coming down. Imagine yourself being able to stay in that, oh, wow, that's amazing space for just 30 seconds longer. Okay. All right. And then just come on back to this space and take a moment, if you'd like, to note what came up for you. And as you're doing that, I want to say, receiving abundance that stays requires you being present to it. It requires you staying in that moment. It requires you being present with the flow instead of constantly trying to control that flow. You have a much more likelihood of having an incredible capacity when you can stay present and be okay in that present moment. And you don't have to be perfect. This is not about being that yogi on the top of the mountain and perfect emotion and perfect. No. But you do want to be able to be there at least 51% of the time. And each percentage point that you can increase, the more you're going to be inviting more into your experience and to be able to live with more in your experience and feel comfortable and allow it to continue. Okay. When you don't learn how to work with that grip, it's easy to see how you can fall into burnout or money cycling, where money's in, money's out, money's in, money's out, money's in, money's out, money's in, money's out, money's out, money's out, money's out, money's in, money's out. Okay. When you don't know how to resolve that grip, you never feel settled. You never feel that peace. If the desire is to not have to worry about money ever again, you can't worry when money is there. Okay, that grip prevents space and flow. It shrinks your capacity and it keeps the flow from moving through your capacity. True abundance that stays requires both space, meaning capacity, and flow. Being comfortable in that moment when something's appearing, knowing that it is coming in. And this isn't about filling up your bank account and never spending anything. You want flow in a bank account. Yes? You want money to come in, and then you want those experiences that money provides. And you want to have the comfort level that as you're having those experiences that money provides, that more is coming in to replace it. Right? Out and in, out and in and out. Okay? That's the comfort level that we're looking for. Okay, so what do you do with it? Once you know you have that gripping, how do you release it? The first answer is how you release it is based on the why of your gripping. it's also reliant on just how far outside of your receiving identity that you're with. Okay. Or how far outside you are in terms of your receiving identity. But there are some good, solid foundational steps you can take to start to ease and to start to figure out the why of the grip. Okay. And truly, the very first step is awareness. If you don't know that you're doing it, you can't fix it, right? You can't shift it. So pay attention when and notice this in the quote small moments. If somebody's holding the door for you, or the client that you've had forever renews again, right? Or you receive a small amount, small meaning it's easy. It's easy for you to it's something that you've done a lot, okay? And just notice when there's flow and it's just like, well, that was great, love that, can't wait to see what happens next sort of feeling. Or notice when notice if there's any of that gripping. Okay. Also notice if when you're aware of that gripping, how easily can you consciously relax your body, consciously relax your mind, say, okay, I'm gripping, I can let this go, this is safe, this is what I'm asking for, there's always flow, the divine is always at my back, right? Notice what situations where you're receiving, where that's super easy, and notice where no matter what you do to fill yourself with safety or with peace, it's just impossible. Okay. So when you notice those places where it's absolutely impossible to get rid of that gripping, the next step is to get curious. I want you to get out a journal or just a piece of paper. And I want you to imagine that gripping is coming from just one part of you. It feels like it's coming from your entire being, but actually this is just coming from a singular part that's having a bit of a meltdown. Okay. So we want to ask if we can talk with just that one part. And first of all, knowing and identifying that it's just one voice is actually helpful, because when it feels like it's coming from everywhere, it's completely overwhelming. But if you know that this is coming from one part of you, and you've got also have a wise part of you, now you have the opportunity to have a dialogue back and forth. Right? So imagine that you can talk to just that part that is feeling the need to grip, and ask, and this is where you get to journal. Tell me about yourself, part. What are you afraid of? What are you worried about? How are you trying to keep me safe? And as you get those pieces of information, now you know what you need to do. Right? Now you get to connect with your wise self. Imagine that you can connect with your soul, or if you think of it as your inner being, or just the voice of you that's wise. What does that part know that is the antidote to what the gripping part is feeling? Let me say that again. So, for whatever the part that's gripping is afraid of, there's an antidote. Your wise self knows what that antidote is. Perhaps it's remembering that you are a piece of divinity and therefore you have access to all of divinity's resources. Maybe it's knowing that you are safe no matter what. Maybe it's knowing that you can have peace no matter what. So whatever your wise self tells you is the antidote, that's what you get to activate within you. And I will share one of my absolute favorite, easiest ways of doing this comes from Jennifer Arezzo, who is the founder of Soul Language, and she calls them divine intelligence prayers. So let's say that the antidote to how you're feeling is to feel safe. So, and you can repeat after me if you'd like. Divine intelligence, fill my body with the knowing and the experience of safety. Divine intelligence, fill my body with the knowing and experience of safety. And you say that until you notice a shift in your being. If you are really agitated, if you're gripping really hard, you might need to do that multiple times. I also like EFT tapping for this as well. Okay. And you know what? You don't even have to slip into that antidote feeling state and just live there. I mean, yes, that's what eventually what you want to do. But if you can activate and feel it even for a few seconds, and then the next time you feel it, you are able to activate it for 30 seconds. And then you activate it for a minute, and then 5 minutes, and then 10 minutes, and then it becomes truth. It starts getting built into your identity. Jumping ahead a little bit to next week's episode, a little bit of a preview. Okay. So remember, this isn't something that you have to switch a lever and just automatically feel the antidote all the time. You're going to be building up to it. Okay. If this is still a challenge, then you want to go a layer deeper and you want to start working with the beliefs. You want to start doing some investigative work as to what those beliefs are and begin to shift out of those beliefs. This is work that we do in the receiving architecture immersion. It does often need a practitioner, somebody that can help you dissect those beliefs. But that's a great place to start. Okay. All right. So I want to remind you, and I said this a little bit earlier, but I want to remind you that abundance isn't just about money. And this gripping doesn't come just when you're thinking about money. It can show up when love deepens or when you have time opening up for you, right? If what you've been wanting is more time for self-care and you build a schedule that allows you to have more space in your day, and all of a sudden you're in that space of your day and it's like, this doesn't feel safe. I should be doing something, right? Other forms of abundance are beauty and recognition, being out in nature. So this gripping can impact you no matter what type of abundance is flowing, because all abundance is divine energy. That's all it is. Different forms. Money is one form of divine energy. Time is another form of divine energy. Love is another form of divine energy, whether that's love for somebody else or love for yourself. Right? So that gripping can show up in any form of abundance. So when you're starting to get curious, notice it in all areas. All right. And take that curiosity another step. Right? Where is it that I grip most? Is it easy for me to allow love in my life but not so much money? Do I grip when that my calendar gets really full because I've asked for all of these things and I'm not getting them? Or I've asked for all these things and now I am getting them and now my calendar is super full. Right? Does that where the gripping comes in? What form of abundance really triggers it? And how could each one of those areas, how can you be 5% softer in those areas that trigger you the most? And as you do this work, what you're going to notice is that, all the tools we talked about last week for expanding your capacity, when you work with these tools to soften your grip, you're going to notice that more and more often your capacity is full in the best possible way. And then you get to expand your capacity a little bit more. Okay. Brilliant. Okay. So I've given enough hints about what next week's episode is going to be all about. Next episode is called Are You a Visitor in Abundance or Do You Belong There? And we are going to be talking all about your receiving identity. Are you somebody who can experience abundance in one-offs, or are you somebody that who lives in abundance? Okay. So today, right, was all about how we react, and next week is all about who are we? I'm the kind of person who. And as you are able to identify the I'm the person who question, now you're able to start to shift that so that you can begin to anticipate, begin to expect new things to flow in, which has an immediate impact on whether abundance is staying or not. Okay. All right. So I want to leave you with this thought that we don't experience intermittent abundance because it isn't possible or because living in abundance isn't real. Abundance tends to drip out because we don't let it land. We don't let it settle. We don't let it become normal. And this isn't about creating another strategy. And not that strategies and action aren't a part of the puzzle, but if you really are in this pattern of abundance coming and leaving and coming and leaving, coming and leaving and leaving and leaving to the point where you're feeling under resourced, the first step isn't to have a new strategy. It's about feeling steadier as abundance comes in. And that steadiness is built one experience after one experience after one experience. All right. I believe that that's enough for today. I would love, love, love to hear your thoughts. I would love to hear what comes up for you. So please drop all of that into the comments. I can't wait to hear from you. And I will see you next week. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.